Today is Monday, August 5th, 2019. Welcome everybody to the Cabrillo Unified School District Governing Board meeting. Today's a special Governing Board meeting. So we'll start with item 1, call to order. Roll call quorum. We have 4 out of the 5 board members here. So myself, Kimberly, Mary Beth, and Freya. So we'll get started with the quorum. And the next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. So all will please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4, adoption of the agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Okay, second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Motion passes. Vote passes 4-0. Okay. Item 5, comments from the public related to items not in this agenda. Seeing as there are none, we'll move on to item 6, reports, information, and presentations. Dr. McFettridge.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to CUSD.
Oh, I have to press this button?
Okay, this is my first time. I'm reminded that we need to speak into the microphone to be heard, and I want to thank the public for coming to this board meeting today, a special board meeting to give us a financial overview and considerations to inform midterm financial solvency. As the board later will be entertaining a public hearing, which has been noticed, and then taking action, potentially discussing a resolution to call a parcel tax election. Oh yeah, I'd be happy to stand there, that'd be great. So the objectives of today's presentation are to discuss the current funding situation in Cabrillo Unified, to discuss a preliminary plan for midterm financial solvency, which would include a potential parcel tax for the board to consider, to present information to inform a subsequent public hearing this afternoon, and then to inform the board's decision on the potential parcel tax ballot measure. I do want to welcome Denise Porterfield from San Mateo County Office of Education, who's Deputy Superintendent of Business Services there, and I will be asking her at the end of this presentation to give some information to the board so the board can ask some questions about our budget currently. Okay. Thanks, Rosie. I don't know why this isn't working. All right. There you go. So just so everybody knows about the board agenda and so you all can know what to expect, we'll do this presentation. There will be some potential strategies for midterm financial solvency included in this presentation. There will be decision points for a recommendation for a replacement parcel tax should the board choose that. And there will be 2 scenarios that have been explored before and discussed before. There'll be a discussion of the board on the information received. I think there will be some questions from the board based on Ms. Porterfield's presentation to us at the end. There will be a public hearing after this item on the proposal for a replacement parcel tax, and then the board is asked to take action and vote on our CUSD board resolution. You'll see that, first of all, K-12 education funding is inadequate and underfunded in California. I'm happy to come to Cabrillo Unified. I recently was superintendent in Alameda Unified, and I had to lead parcel taxes there and bond measures on several occasions over the last decade, and that is because funding is inadequate and underfunded in California. I heard from Tony Thurmond last week at a conference that we're 41st in the nation, and considering we're the 5th largest economy in the world, this is kind of a terrible state we're in, and it's because the California has inadequately and underfunded all the districts in California. There's increasing statewide advocacy for full and fair funding of schools, but there's ongoing state budget fiscal prudence and districts are struggling. This is not just Cabrillo Unified School District. This includes districts in the East Bay, in the North Bay, the South Bay, here on the coast side. But Cabrillo Unified, I think, particularly has great challenges, which you will hear about tonight. Many districts continue to rely on local parcel tax measures to supplement local control funding formula and other K-12 revenues. Those rates vary widely across San Mateo County. You will get some more information in this presentation about the variability of those different parcel tax measures across the county. Cabrillo Unified, coming into the district, I've realized now, has forecasted significant budget gaps as our reserves have diminished because our costs continue to outpace revenues for a host of reasons. And at a minimum, short-term Cabrillo Unified School District budget stabilization is needed now, and a midterm financial solvency strategy is strongly advised. We simply have to do this. This is no longer a choice of ours. You'll hear from Ms. Porterfield, the Deputy Superintendent of Business Services from the county office, in moments about how indeed Assembly Bill 1840, is that right? Assembly Bill 1840 does make the county make us do certain things in the near future. Now, first of all, you'll see as far as San Mateo County and per student funding highlights, CUSD, Cabrillo Unified, is the 6th lowest as funding in San Mateo County as far as local control funding formula and parcel tax. 80% of average LCFF and 66% of average parcel tax. You'll see on the right some arrows that'll help you so you don't have to look through the small numbers. Cabrillo Unified, LCFF, 6th lowest overall and lowest among the local unifieds. You'll see there are unified school districts, Cabrillo Unified, the spending per student is a little over 10,000, a little under 11,000, 10,747, while our neighbors who have unified districts, South San Francisco is at 11,000 and La Honda Pescadero is at 18,000. There's a lot of reasons for that, but part of this, if you look on the right, Cabrillo Unified School District's parcel tax is 6th lowest overall and mid among the local unifieds. You'll see that all districts, the average is 227, between an average of 0 to 828. The top quartile is $380 and the bottom quartile is $61. The financial outlook, and this is based on a general fund that was received by this board June 6, 2019. These figures do not include salary schedule increases for our Teachers Association or our classified staff or administrators or other staff. And you'll see here that this picture shows increasing red as far as the budget gap in the years ahead. That's something that basically we're addressing here. I don't want to go through these numbers. Our interim chief business officer, James Crawford, could speak to this further if the board has questions, and we can come back to this slide, but this is something that's been shared by the board. We continue to have flat revenues and increasing costs, partly due to state mandates upon us. Those erode our reserves, and we forecast a significant budget gap, increases to greater than 25% of revenues by 2022-2023 without that parcel tax. So the parcel tax polling results, you also heard in June from TBWB that there is solid support according to polling for a $150 renewal tax. It meets the 2/3 voting level. It's a solid support for increase. It falls slightly below but approaches the minimum when including lean yes. And historically, parcel tax ballot actual results trend slightly higher than in polls, but it has been recommended to us by TBWB that if you were to go with a $150 renewal, no increase, and it's a replacement parcel tax, there is solid support for that. And of course, the recommendation from me and from your interim chief business officer would have to be to consider TBWB's recommendation here, that is the safest bet to go with a replacement parcel tax because that polls appropriately. The budget impact of potential parcel tax measures here. Even with a renewal parcel tax at the current rate or a slightly higher rate, major cuts will need to be implemented in Cabrillo Unified School District, up to $4.9 million over 3 years through 2022-23. You'll note that full-time employee, FTE, fully loaded cost is approximately $100,000 with benefits, et cetera, and an example of that, $1 million translates to approximately 10 FTE. If you extrapolate that, $5 million could be as much as 50 people laid off. That is just a reality for us when so much of our budget is spent on salaries and on hiring people. In these budget gap scenarios, we can look at other ways to cut, but there will be potential cuts to employees. A financial advisory committee was collected in the past year by former Chief Business Officer Crystal Leach, and recommendations are really an important context for this financial solvency planning, and I want to go over this briefly. There will be deeper dives into this for the board and public in September, but a committee of community members was convened, led by Crystal Leach in spring, to brainstorm and compile a potential list of ranked budget cuts. There was a total of $3.2 million of recommended budget cuts that included consolidation, and of course that's consolidation of schools, reduction, whether that be reduction in force or services, and elimination of services, as well as the exploration of transferring costs to partner organizations, and these potential cuts were compiled and ranked. Again, this would be brought back to the board and brought back to the public in September. Cabrillo Unified has to explore creative efficiencies. However, budget cuts and staff reductions may require reducing student services or increasing staff workload. Again, as I've discussed in the past, this could mean the loss of jobs, the loss of services. Again, you'll see this in bold. There are no board decisions on budget cuts proposed today. We have not included a draft listing of those cuts because we need time to review them, and we will bring those back to the board, hopefully in a closed session special workshop before we take that to other schools so we can continue this vetting with the community. A draft listing will also need to be compiled with additional recommendations from the district, potentially with FCMAT, which is the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team, which I think the county would be coordinating with us on use of that services, and that will be shared with the communities in the fall and winter for board decisions that would be made in the winter or spring. But we will need for the county actionable cuts, as I understand it from Deputy Superintendent Porterfield from the county office, this winter. So this first proposal, the preliminary strategy for midterm financial solvency, would inform what we're talking about as far as the parcel tax. What has been proposed and polled is a $150 per parcel measure on the November 2019 ballot. It is a replacement parcel tax. That is no new taxes. It's just what people have been paying for years previous. At which point we would see a cut of at least $750,000 for this school year. We would bring those cuts to the board, of course, in the winter and make those cuts following in spring of 2020. We would assess the feasibility for a potential second parcel tax measure and look to see if that could come in a year or further on. And we would plan for further cuts to achieve long-term solvency. Again, you can see post-measure how we need to make cuts and how that number continues to increase depending on whether or not we pass the tax. The pros of this proposal is that there is a solid support for $150 as a replacement parcel tax according to polls. So for the November 2019 ballot measure, if approved tonight at $150, there is solid support for that proposal. The pros are that budget cuts are challenging, but they are less than what would be required if we don't pass a parcel tax. The cons, of course, is that there's a risk of voter fatigue and economic downturn and the costs for a second measure. So if a second measure was not passed, an additional $2.6 million of drastic cuts by 22-23 would be needed, depending, of course, on where we come with the state funding and looking at other things, how we would reallocate dollars. Additional cuts will likely be needed to manage the long-term budget ahead. But again, when polling suggests, according to our partners with TBWB, that $150 has solid support, that's usually what we're going to pass as a recommendation because they are the experts. An alternative to this that I understand the board heard in June was a proposed $197 parcel measure on November 2019's ballot. It would reduce the cuts we would have to make in the 2021 school year. We would assess the feasibility for a second parcel tax for outgoing years, and we would still need to plan for further cuts to achieve long-term solvency. You can see here that with a larger measure, you have less cuts over time because you have a larger measure. The pros are the budget cuts are more manageable. The cons are that there's slightly less solid support for $197 according to polling. There is a continued risk of voter fatigue, so the second measure might not be passed. If a second measure is not passed, we're still going to have to make drastic cuts by 22, 23 and ongoing, and further cuts will still likely need to be made. This was just an overview financial planning process that was provided to the board in the past. It shows some of the work that the district has done already. You can see that we will need to do ongoing work with the community going forward to tell them about the parcel tax and what cuts would be needed to be made with or without that parcel tax. This next slide and the slide after just detail the different parcel tax rates. And you'll see that San Bruno appears to have no parcel tax. You'll see that Jefferson has $68, Redwood City $85, and then it keeps going up until you see at the bottom districts such as Menlo Park City, $828 a parcel. So we have parcels that, we have districts that have no parcel tax, and we have districts that have very large parcel taxes. If you look at the high school districts again, San Mateo Union High, Sequoia Union High, Jefferson Union High, you'll see that Jefferson has $118 per parcel tax. And you'll see the Unifieds, South San Francisco, La Honda Pescadero, Cabrillo. South San Francisco has no parcel tax. Cabrillo has $150 and La Honda Pescadero has $100. Again, this is just a sort of a pie chart. Cabrillo Unified's operating budget snapshot. We have a heavy reliance in this district on community support. The bulk of the budget does go to our employee costs. Like many districts in California, the money in does not just represent LCFF or state funding or basic aid funding. It also suggests that a lot of this funding comes from other local sources. This includes a parcel tax, our parent-teacher organizations and foundations, and you'll see a pie chart on the left of the money in. And other local, I think that says 8.4%, am I right? Or other local, 8.4%, that green pie in the pie chart. And then the money out, 82% of Cabrillo Unified School District funding is spent on employee salaries and benefits. Again, it would be very difficult on employees and on students and families if we did not pass a parcel tax, if we did not have that revenue, and if we had to make these cuts. So that's just I think the pie chart is very good for people who are visual learners like me to show you how much is spent on benefits, salaries, et cetera, and how much would be taken from us if we didn't have that local support money, whether it be parcel tax or other donors. Before we go to board discussion on this, I do want to invite Deputy Superintendent Denise Porterfield from San Mateo County Office of Education to speak during this part of the presentation as was requested.
So good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, sort of. I hate to always bring this message to a board. But one of the things I do want to say is your superintendent has just provided you with a very serious situation before you, and he's made it very clear for you. So that's one of the first messages I usually am delivering, but I think he's done a very good job in letting you know exactly where you stand. And everything that he said is exactly what we were going to be talking about tonight is if you pass the parcel tax, 150, 197, you're still going to have to make reductions. So the one thing that I do want to stress to you, right now we are in budget review for all of our districts, however we are done with yours. Essentially, had we not had all the transitions that are happening, the work that we know that's already gone into this a little bit, you would have a non-approved budget, which means we would be sending it back to you to go ahead and do the work that you're going to be doing already. So the county office has decided that we're going to do a conditional budget approval. It does mean that the superintendent of schools has to do some things and has to be involved.
Under AB 1200, which started years ago when one of the first couple of districts went insolvent, there was a lot of regulations that were written about what our role is. One is that we have to review your budgets and determine if you're fiscally solvent. Under a budget adoption, there's budget approval, conditional budget, and or non-approval. Under the interim reports that you'll see during the year, it's either positive, you're going to make all 3 years, current and subsequent, in all your financial obligations. Qualified, you're going to make the current and you may not make one of the other years, or you're negative, you may not make any of the years. So right now you're sitting in, if this was an interim report, you're sitting at negative. Under AB 1840, which the superintendent had referred to, there is a whole list of new requirements. They've shifted takeover from the state level. There's still state involvement, but it's a county level. So the superintendent of schools in the county would be putting in the representative that normally the state would do. So if you were negative and you were going insolvent, which is where you're headed if you don't do these actions, they would come in and do a takeover, and they don't care about the programs. And at the point where the county office has to come in, we do care about the programs, but we do have to get you to fiscal solvency. So under conditional approval, I have to name a fiscal advisor. So right now I'm naming myself as that, with the power of the superintendent. Everything we do is under her authority. So that right now I would be meeting with you, meeting with the CBO, meeting with the superintendent all along. So at every board meeting there'll be a representative. The two I want to introduce to you tonight are Wendy Richards. She is my administrator over District Business Services. So she's involved in the oversight of all districts. And I have Anita Singh. She is your direct manager who is going to know a whole lot about you. And so one of us will be with you from here forward. So under AB 1840, the new law basically says that FICMAT, which is a state agency who is involved in state takeovers and is involved in supporting districts, it's not necessarily service. They're going to be coming in and telling you what to do. At 3 qualified reports, so you've already had 2, your first interim and your second interim last year. Your third interim is just a report at what the status is, so that one is not in the count. But the conditional budget approval starts their involvement with you. So as soon as I deliver this message tomorrow, I'll be reaching out to FICMAT to come in and provide some support and take a look at things. They can help verify where your budget actually sits right now. If you were actually negative, if I had said non-approval, they would have been in here tonight with me. So I've been talking to them, and they're good with at least starting the relationship with your new superintendent, your interim CBO, and the work that you're doing. Because essentially what it does is it sets up the criteria and the timing of which you're going to have to do this work, and you're already laying out a plan for it. So we believe that to be positive. If at any point that you either cannot make your 3% reserve, you're considered insolvent, or you don't have enough cash to make payroll. It doesn't matter what your ending fund balance is, as long as if there's not enough cash to do your payroll, you're insolvent, and then you're already in the takeover. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I had a little bit more to talk about here, but your superintendent covered it very, very well.
Are there any questions from the board? Either our superintendent or our county representative, Ms. Porterfield?
Hello, thank you for laying this out for us. Can you give us any feedback on the how we rack and stack in terms of conditional approval compared with other boards in the county?
So right now, we are considering conditional approval for one other district in the county. The others are all approved, or they will meet approval, but they'll always have conditions. I believe, hopefully the letter has been shared that we write. It's up to 6 to 10 pages, depending on what district. So there's some conditions in there that you may need to go back and take a look at. Some of our districts are headed in the same direction where you find yourself now. So we're giving them advice, giving them warning, making sure that they start taking action. But we'll end up with 2, most likely, which is we called you conditional approval last year, but at the state level, we did approve you because the work was still happening. So the trigger is really what we say to the state. But this time we must say that you're conditionally approved.
question, point of order for Dr. McFetrich. We have two comments from the public here tonight, one pertaining to this agenda item, one pertaining to the public hearing, which are obviously very related. Shall we go on with, would you recommend we go on with questions and discussion, or should we maybe take a pause here to bring up the one that specifically, at least the one that specifically requested a comment on this agenda topic at this point?
Yes, I'd just like to remind,
Sorry about this, I'll have to get used to that. I'd just like to remember the public, when we have public comments, it is not the board's practice or the superintendent's practice, any staff member's practice to respond to those comments, but we do take those comments and we can follow through on those later. Ms. Porterfield, do you have anything else to share, or does any other board member have any other questions for Ms. Porterfield at this time?
Great.
Thank you so
very
much, and I think we could take public comment at this time.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, so at this time then, I'd like to call comment from the public. Justin Stockman, please.
If you don't mind, I'll actually wait till the next.
What's it, the hearing?
item. Yeah. the
Okay,
hearing.
okay,
Sorry about
perfect.
that.
Sounds great, thanks. So we'll make that number 7. Okay, very good. So then no comments for this topic from the public. Do we have other questions or comments from the board for either Dr. McFetrich or last chance for anything for our county representative?
Again, I just want to say to the board, I'm delighted to come into the district. You have a lot of great things going on here. You're not unaware of this issue. It's not, I'm long of the habit not to fix blame, but to try to fix problems. There are a lot of districts, and as you've heard, there's another district in the county that has the same kind of problems. I will say that this is a result of being inadequately funded at the state level, and I think there's some moves that we can make in the year ahead to seek fiscal solvency, and indeed, I thank the county and welcome the county, and we will especially welcome the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team in helping us put our house in order going forward. But I think the board understands, and hopefully the public understands, why the need is for local funding, why the need is for a renewal parcel tax, and why there is a need for fiscal austerity for this district going forward.
Okay, thank you. I just want to thank you, Dr. McFetrich. It's all about jumping into the frying pan, or from the frying pan into the fire, or whatever the expression is in terms of your first presentation with us in your new tenure as our superintendent. So I want to welcome you and our additional new members of the team. We'll do maybe perhaps formal introductions in our regular board meeting on Thursday for everybody, if that's okay. But I just want to comment, and again, echoing your sentiments at the outset of the presentation and what you just said right now. I think it's unfortunate that so many of our districts across the state are finding ourselves in this kind of situation with flat revenues, increasing cost of living, especially in the Bay Area. And the structural inequities that exist in those formulas are being felt by districts, especially like ours. And so I think the gratitude that we have for our public and continue to be, hugely supportive of our students in our district through multiple means, be it parcel tax or volunteer time or anything in between, I think can't be understated, because we really do rely heavily on it. With that, there are limitations to that as well. So I think the point is really, really critical, and I appreciate your walking us through a lot of data. And so what about the data, like what the data means in terms of the implications. When we talk $1 million, it's easy to forget what that means, right? But that's actual people that will, whose services we will perhaps not have moving forward, and even in the situation of having a parcel tax passed. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate we can't cover that gap. But I think right now, all our data shows that it's behooves us to kind of look for this short-term budget stabilization, and then very quickly, in tandem, if you will, start to look at our longer-term financial strategies. So I appreciate having yourself, and our interim CBO on board also to help us through that, together with our partners at the county and FICMAT over the next several months. So, are there any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing as there are none, we'll move to the public hearing, item number 7. Give me just a sec to pull up my paper. So item 7, public hearing in connection with proposed education parcel tax on November 5th, 2019. Conducting public hearing in connection with proposed education parcel tax November 5th, 2019. We can see the memorandum and information in our packet. I can turn it over to Dr. McFettridge if you want to say anything further, and without, if you have any further comments, and then I can start the public hearing.
Sorry, thank you.
It's not what I'm accustomed to at all. The public hearing is something that is mandated by us. It gives the public an opportunity to speak to this item. We have been advised to, as you'll see on the agenda, have the public hearing. It gives the board an opportunity to hear from the public. We have noticed this, and I think we should just proceed. And if you could read the language from that, President, that would be great.
So notice of public hearing regarding qualified special tax. Notice is hereby given the Board of Ed of the Cabrillo Unified School District. So should I read this whole thing?
I would appreciate
Okay.
it. If you would like me to, I will.
No, I have no problem. No, I just wanted to check. The special board meeting to be held today on August 5th, 2019. We'll hold a public hearing pursuant to the Government Code Section 50077 on the issue of calling an election on November 5th, 2019 to impose a qualified special tax, parcel tax, on all parcels of taxable real property in the district's boundaries. At the hearing, public input will be solicited concerning the proposed parcel tax measure. The public hearing will begin at approximately 7 p.m. I think that was probably an error. It should be 4 p.m. as it says later in the text, or as soon thereafter as possible. The district office located at 498 Kelly. Further information concerning this hearing may be obtained from Dr. Sean McFettridge, District Superintendent at your number. So we will initiate the public hearing at this time. And I have 2 green sheets. If there's anybody else that would like to come up and speak, please do fill in a green sheet and provide to Ms. Acosta. So we'll start with Justin Stockman. And a reminder, as Dr. McFettridge stated earlier, this is the case for public comments. I suppose in this case as well, we're not, although it's a public hearing, is it still correct that we're not allowed to reply to comments specifically?
I would say so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Justin.
Good afternoon. My name is Justin Stockman. I live here in Half Moon Bay. I grew up here. My parents grew up here. My grandparents moved here in the 60s. I also grew up with teachers. My mom was a teacher. My grandfather was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher's aide for a very long time right here at Hatch. So when I look at a budget and I see the amount that's going to teacher salaries and how constricting that is, I know very well that that's not a case of mismanagement. I've seen teacher salaries. I grew up with a teacher's salary, putting food in my mouth, and I still see my parents living with the benefits that teachers are afforded, and frankly, it's terrible. So, it leaves me wondering how we got here. And coming from these schools, I graduated Half Moon Bay High School in 2003. My wife, Carolyn, graduated Half Moon Bay in 2003. My dad, my uncle. And I can't help but look and see how it's business as usual for this community, that we've been playing the same game for a really long time of underfunding schools and allowing bad governance at the state and federal level to affect our children. And when I look at just the last 2 weeks of what's going on in this country, and I think about the realities of that and what's affecting children and the opportunities that we have to affect children. I'm a firefighter. I work with cops. I work around public health. I work with county social services. There's not opportunities to affect change there. The opportunity to affect change is here, is right here in these schools. That's where you change kids. You probably didn't sign up to fight a war, but that's what you're doing. You are fighting a culture war, and you're fighting for the soul of this country. And we are, as a community, we are in how we fund these schools. We are working, trying to make sure that we can make that difference. So right now the system is broken. It's broken at the state level, it's broken at the federal level. As you've pointed out very well, we don't have time right now to fix that. People in this community are trying very hard. It cannot be done in time. And that doesn't leave us many options, and I dislike that very much. We must pass a parcel tax. But I'm going to take it further than that. We have to ask for a lot. If you're going to play it safe, if you're going to do the sure thing, what does that do except extend business as usual? If we don't have the courage to ask for what we need, what are we left with, and what's the real choice that we're making? We need to ask for a lot. I hope that the approach of this school district can be to be an open book to this community. Mistakes have been made in the past. Wounds are still open. People are still angry. There is a strong anti-tax sentiment in this community, and we need to acknowledge that, and we need to work through it by being honest, by showing people what you've done today, and more, saying this is where we are, and this is what happens if we don't fix it. Thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate what all of you do. Please, please, work for a parcel tax and ask for the most we can get. I think the chance or the opportunity for voter fatigue is very high in this community, and I think you'll find that coming back in a year and asking for more is going to be way more challenging than asking for a reasonable amount now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. Your second public comment for the afternoon, Amber Syria.
Hello, many of you I know. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to voice our opinions publicly regarding the parcel tax. So my name is Amber Soria. I have 2 children enrolled in CUSD, elementary age children. I am a CUSD graduate, as are my parents and grandparents, so I echo Justin's sentiment about being long invested in this community, and similarly, I'm from a family of educators as well. As far as the parcel tax is concerned, I want to let you guys know that Co-Citers for Better Education funding, we will continue our advocacy work at the state level. We believe, we know the funding formula is broken at the state level, and we also know that we cannot get that fixed fast enough for CUSD to remain solvent. So we will continue that work, but we will also continue supporting education within the community about why we need a parcel tax, about what the parcel tax means and the implications of not renewing a parcel tax, and what that really looks like in real time in terms of potential cuts to staffing, programming, schools, all of those things. We feel it's really important to draw the correlations to very specific things. $1 million looks like losing 10 staff positions, things that are really tangible for the community to understand what we would be looking at losing. We hope that the campaign could be run on specific messaging that will help people understand that, because terms that are kind of overarching, like catastrophic cuts, are too easy to gloss over. We need to explain to our community what those catastrophic cuts look like. And the fact of the matter is, what they look like is they will be felt in classrooms. There's no way around it, a district our size having to make that significant of cuts, that it won't be felt in a classroom somewhere. So, similar to Justin, I know it's a stretch, but our hope would also be that we go for as much as we possibly can. I know the polling was very close. I sat in some of those meetings. I sat on the Financial Advisory Committee, and I understand the concern about needing to absolutely pass something, because the stabilizing funding is critical. But I also am very concerned at the community's response to us not coming out and saying, this is what we really need. This is what it would actually take to help us significantly. And I think that, similar to what Justin said, at some point we're going to have to take a leap and make the community really understand that in order to continue our school district and the programming that they really find important and that is unique to CUSD, because we have a lot of programming that is very unique to us. We need to be asking really for what it will actually take to do that. So thank you all for your time and your efforts. I know that doing all of this work for a parcel tax on top of all of your regular jobs is a tremendous amount to undertake. So we really appreciate you guys doing all the legwork and really sharing the information as clearly as possible with not only parents, but the community at large. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Amber. Okay, final call. Any other folks from the public? If not, we will close the public hearing. And that brings us to item 8, action items. 8A, very thematically, adopt the resolution number 1419, calling an election, establishing specifications of the election order, and requesting consolidation with other elections occurring on November 5th, 2019. Do we have I guess then I'll call for a motion and then introduce to you.
Just to introduce, I think the public and the board have seen the resolution, the board memo calling for a parcel tax election. We won't read the entire resolution, I don't believe, but we do encourage the board to discuss that because you will be making a decision one way or the other about how to proceed.
Very good. Do we have a motion to approve? Okay, second? Okay. Questions, comments, discussion? Folks?
First, I just want to say thank you to Justin and Amber for speaking out in the public hearing, and a real thank you and appreciation for your passion and commitment to education. I'm trying to find Amber, but I don't see her. There she is. For both of you, for the work you've already done and the work that you'll continue to do for this community, for your own children, but for all the children of this community. And I really, really appreciate your passion and your energy for that and the work you've done at a statewide level. And I really support that. I think this is wonderful that you've come and spoken. And I guess I want to speak, my piece in terms of my experience with parcel taxes in this community. As many of you know, I became involved in the first parcel tax that passed in this community, Measure E, which was in 2010. I was not on the board at the time. I hadn't even thought about being on the board. I was a new parent. My one daughter was in preschool and the other one was in kindergarten. And I said, we need a parcel tax. And everyone said, oh my goodness, we've done that 5 or 6 times before and it has never passed in this community. There is no way we can do it. But there was a group that I wasn't involved with in the beginning because, again, my kids were so young, who did the polling on their own. They knew the need was great. I mean, the need at the time was $300. But the only thing that polled well that they knew they could pass was $150. And we worked really hard with cuts looming, similar to what we're looking at now. We were able to pass it. And then 4 years later, about 5 or 6 years ago, that parcel tax was renewed. And in the interim, we also passed several bonds in order to secure funding to repair our 50-year-old leaking schools and roofs. I feel very proud of the work that we've been able to do. And it was after that parcel tax passed that I decided to run for the board. There were a couple vacancies, and I chose to take this on. And I guess I'm speaking about that history because I think that it's, I want more. I would love, what was the highest one up there? Menlo Park City, 867 per parcel. We already do so many amazing things with the funds that we have, and we could do so much more for all the children of our district with those funds. But I also need to be based in a reality that I know. And I latch onto the words that you said, reasonable, and what we can do. And I know from experience, having worked on these parcel tax campaigns, how nail-biting it is, how down to every last vote, and that we really do need to follow the recommendations of the experts on this. And we need to be sure that we can bank this 150. And whether or not it's the state then that comes in that has some more, AB 39 finally has legs this year because of other stuff that's happened in other districts. It's looking like it'll pass. Maybe the governor will sign it. But we need to bank this. If we lose this 150, we are truly devastated. And if we pass this, we can manage some cuts and look towards that next step in the future. And I know that that's not the most exciting route to go, but for me, it's the most exciting in that I can then feel very assured in moving out into the community and amongst funders and other folks and saying, look, we can do this, we can pass this, and this will help us to that next step of financial solvency. And I I guess I just want to really reiterate that in terms of my position and my support for doing it. And again, I appreciate the passion that is behind the we want more, because I want more too. I really do. And I want the state to figure themselves out. I want the federal government to fully fund the programs that they require of us. And I would love for this community to be willing and able to fund the schools at a higher amount, or for Prop 13 to be different so that we got the same funding as some of our same, similar sized districts over the hill. But this is just the reality that we have. And so I guess I'll just speak my piece in support of a straight renewal for 150.
I'm not sure who to answer, but Brady may know, or Mary Beth. For Measure S, if I understand correctly, we passed by 6 votes. 5 votes. Measure XYZ, sorry. The last measure we passed was by 5 votes. What did the polling anticipate? Was that original polling higher, or?
Yeah,
Sure.
it was higher, but Joy Jakarta is here from TBWB.
Okay.
And since you missed the presentation in June that had all of that data, we talked about presenting it again today, but
Okay.
go ahead, Joy.
Hi, Joy Tatarka from TBWB Strategies. We've been working with your district for many years now. So the initial polling for the bond measure that was put on the ballot did come in right around 60%, but there was a margin of error, which would have put us right at 55%. So it was a plus or minus, right, which is often true in polling. So even in the numbers that you saw tonight for the parcel tax, we could be 5% lower than the support we saw. So, that's also something to consider. We could have been higher, and, certainly you're polling for previous parcel taxes. You've been able to exceed expectations, but it is a plus or minus. So although the bond passed with 5 votes, and the polling showed that it would pass at 60%, it was still within the margin of error. So your polling was accurate.
Can I ask a clarifying question just to make sure I understand what you just said? 'Cause I think, if I recall, in the data you presented last month, the confidence intervals were not shown, right? So I'm curious what the confidence intervals are. Are they 5%? Because as you said, if they're 5% in the, I do remember for the confidence.
So we did a poll back in September that looked at, because initially the idea was to try and do this parcel tax renewal sooner, but we did do polling last September, and even a straight renewal did not show that it would pass. And the board then made the decision to defer that. So we did a supplemental polling with EMC Research in May. And I thought they were 4.6 because it was a split sample. Because so it was
4.9.
4.9. So
Yeah.
because it was we had to do a split sample in order to ask the 2 numbers. So it had to be, so it ended up a little bit higher.
So, and if I recall the slide you presented there too, which sort of gets to Kimberly's question too, is the trend. I remember you had a really nice slide on all the trends too, and it was interesting to see that the trends were that the actuals were lower for the bonds but higher for the parcel taxes. So that was interesting, but probably not enough to exceed that confidence interval.
Correct.
I'm guessing, because it was
Yes.
only 2%. Well, yeah, the numbers are so close that if your confidence intervals are slightly off, then, it's all
No,
statistics,
it is
so.
true. I mean, we can easily
Very
say
close.
that, yes,
Yeah.
bonds have always polled better and performed worse in the district, whereas parcel taxes, have polled right around the 2/3 level, and then you've also had very active campaign committees who have worked very hard to support those parcel taxes. I mean, you're talking about how unfortunate it is that the funding for state and federal is, they aren't meeting their mandates. The other unfortunate truth is a parcel tax takes 2/3 to pass. So we need 66.7% of voters to say yes in order for this to pass. So it takes a lot of work for parcel taxes, quite honestly.
And then our poll, just to repeat again, our poll was for what percent?
So the polling,
For the 197, that higher level?
yeah, just,
It was
Yeah.
just below, okay.
yeah.
Okay. So we are like just right at that edge. When you look at your margin of error, we literally are taking a gamble.
We're taking a gamble.
No
with
matter
trade
what.
renewal as well.
Yeah, either way. the
Right,
numbers
but
are
I
so
think
close.
it's
more.
But the even the polling was different for the two values.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just kind of a quick little comparison. You know, one of the other questions we asked was there a need for additional funding? Did people think there was a need for additional funding for the district? And 69% of parents said there was a great need. The rest of the community was at 32%. So, you know, I think your parents are very aware of the need for the additional funding, but it's the rest of the community, and many of those are your registered voters that maybe don't understand the need as well. So when we polled the questions, both at the straight renewal and then at the additional to 197, the straight renewal was just above the required 2/3 amount. The additional tax amount was a little bit lower. So it was under that 2/3 amount. And I will say this, I mean, if we could make these numbers different and we could get you as much as you need, I would want that for you too. I have worked in districts where this 2/3 threshold is so hard, and they end up with polling numbers that are just below 2/3, and they say, boy, we have the energy, we can do it. And we worked our tails off, and we've been on the other side of that number. We've been on the, 5 votes shy, and it's heartbreaking. So I know you guys have a really tough decision to make, but this is not an easy task before you to get that 2/3 number.
Well, I want to first thank the Parcel Tax Committee for all the work that was done. This is obviously a lot of work and a lot of thought leading up to this. I want to thank the team that quickly, again, jumped on board with straight into the fire, out of the frying pan.
I'd like to make one
Oh,
comment. Are you wrapping it up?
No, I'm just making a comment. It's okay. So I just want to first thank everybody for all the hard work, and just say this is, again, to our comments earlier, unfortunate that we're in the situation that we have to, look to our community to continue, and I would think that's the important thing is a continuation of the support that we've had so far. I recall, and now this is just like a back of the envelope number that Crystal had shared with us at one point for, like, if we were looking at like a 3-year solvency, I think that number was substantially higher, more like $300 plus or minus. And I think clearly we don't have quantitative data supporting going for what we really need right now. So what we really need right now to have solvency for a few years is we don't have data to know that that's a risk worth taking right now. To me, I appreciate seeing the budget impact numbers that you brought, Sean, because it really shows that either way, at 150 or 197, like, we're making big cuts, and or going back to our community very soon for more support. So I think that it's important that we have that conversation now as context for whatever decision we make today, so that we can be open and transparent with our community about this is not the end, this is kind of the beginning. This is the first step of looking at our this is the two numbers, right? It's what money's coming in, what money's coming out, how can we adjust those two to get them close to where they need to be, that we can be solvent and run our district and serve our students to the greatest capability that we can. So I think that's the unfortunate thing when I look at these numbers. It's either way, with these numbers are so low, we're going down that road. So, Mary Beth.
I just had a comment to add about my husband. I got all riled up one day, that we need more money, and I'm like, that's it, we gotta go for it, we gotta do it. I'd worked on the parcel tax before with Corinne, and so I kind of knew the road we were headed down. I went home and I said to my husband, we should just go for it. We gotta do it, we need the money, and I said, yeah, to my husband, and he said, would this be a tax increase? And I said, yes, and he said, I'm not voting for it. And then I went down the road and I said, well, I'm on the school board, and, the state's not giving us enough. So the difference between saying a renewal of what you're already paying and a tax increase in these political times, I mean, I don't know if you agree with me or not, Joy, but I think that seems like a big deal. And, my husband's like, well, you need to fix it at the state level. Yes, we're trying, it's not gonna come in time. So I'm like, if I'm having a hard time with my husband and I'm a school board member, that kind of just deflated my balloon. And I just thought there is a really big difference in people's mind between doing that, no increase in taxes, and increasing the taxes. So, and I also, everything Freya said, I kind of am along with that, because I also went down that parcel tax road, and I have, after working with TBWB, I have a lot of respect for what they do and the knowledge they bring. So I know they know a lot more about it than I do, and so when they recommend something, I take it to heart.
I myself as well am a graduate of Cabrillo Unified School District, and I'm honored to be on this board. And I have to say, when I first found out, I had the same feeling, like, why would they give money? I mean, it's for the kids. It's for their education. I was very enthusiastic about it, and I feel that the more informed I am, it's looking grim, because I think there is a lack of information out there. I think that it would be devastating if we didn't have even the renewal parcel passed. And I'm confident that even if we do pass a renewal, that if we continue and we get the same support of enthusiastic, community members like yourselves to help us and inform not the parents of who are directly impacted, and it's more of the just voters who have no kids, who have no need, or just the seniors. I mean, all the other community members who we need their vote. But I think, and I'm confident that hopefully later on in the future, we can inform them and we can give them, more information to kind of have their support. But I hear what you were saying, and I appreciate you coming and talking to us as well.
So if we were to go for the higher parcel tax renewal and not make it, next year we'd be looking at $2,400,000 in cuts. If the $150 parcel tax passes, we're only looking at $750,000 in cuts. 3.5 times as much. I love playing craps when I know I can afford to lose it. I don't feel like I can afford to lose it on behalf of our students. So I would err on the side of approving the $150 parcel tax renewal.
Just to make the numbers clear, I think the numbers we have here are $750 is going to need to be made this year. If we put a straight renewal of $150, not the following year. For this year, so we're talking
2020 to 2021.
for that school year, which means in this winter, this early spring, we will make 750 cuts.
Yes,
Yeah,
I understand.
for the following year.
Right.
Okay.
Not in this fiscal year.
Correct, exactly. As compared to 200 if we go for the higher number. And then otherwise we have to, otherwise the numbers start to get more similar as we go down the road because they're so big, basically.
Well, no, but if we do not pass it, if we don't pass anything, we're down $2,400,000 next year. So again, I understand that 500,000 would be much easier with the higher parcel tax. I get that, but I don't know. I've had a number of community people also discuss what those perceptions of of renewing a tax. I think that we're solid, and the logic and rationale for renewing is obvious. For raising a tax, had our education started 9 months ago, in terms of the logic, and to be fair, I know it has. I know that Superintendent Euster and Crystal Leach were doing roadshow talks. I've talked to enough seniors, though, that I know that there's still some ambiguity and misunderstanding there. And so we're going to have our job cut out for us just to get the renewal at this point, is my perception.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with what you just said, Kimberly, in terms of the work has started in terms of educating and really informing our community around how all this works. I'll definitely put a shout out to the group from the Co-Siders for Better Education Fundings. They're doing a lot to raise the awareness, which is the first step that this is an issue. And then you take the next step and deepen people's understanding to understand why it's an issue or how it works. And then the third step is do something about it, right? Write your legislators, support your schools in the meantime, like whatever, there are a wide variety of things that we all can do and a wide variety of things that we can each individually do based on, what groups are involved with or what we do in our community and so on. So I think that's a situation where we're getting some really good traction. Are we there yet? I'm not convinced that we're there yet to have a full understanding for our community to understand that trade-off in my heart is absolutely worth it. Like, no doubt about it, right? But is it worth it to enough people in our community that we can feel this will work in 3 months? I'm not convinced, to be honest. So that's my worry.
I know we had a big discussion about all this, and we're rehashing some of it, but I know last meeting was our major discussion we had on this parcel tax, so I don't want to rehash everything. But I know, just a reminder that one of the slides did talk about who our voters are, and I know Joy had mentioned that 68% of the parents know that we have financial problems, but then I can't remember what the actual percentage of the parents that vote is, but it was very low. So yes, some people know, but that's another thing that came into our discussion last month when we went through all the slides from TBWD. So I just want to bring that up again.
Yeah, and I agree, with those points as well, and I appreciate having this open, transparent discussion is so essential, and having the public trust to gain the understanding and the awareness and the understanding the need of this broader issue. It's messy, it's hairy, it's like yucky, and who wants to think about this as opposed to like some really nice cool stuff that we have here on the coast that would rather be doing. But heck, yet here we are. It is what we signed up for these high-paying jobs. No, I'm just kidding. Be clear, we're all volunteers. So I think we have our work cut out for us in the next several months, especially to make these decisions and to have the robust public input, which is starting tonight, and to just continue being transparent and forthcoming. And there are going to be hard questions that come up, and we need to answer them. And we won't have satisfactory answers for all of them, for everybody, and that's part of the game. But the more we can share and engage our community, I think we will, build the trust that we need to, for the long term, to have that longer term basis of support strengthened further than it is now. So, any other comments, questions, Dr. McFetridge?
I just want to remind the public and the board that once the board does make a decision about whether or not this will be put on the ballot, if it is put on the ballot, that staff and the district will no longer be able to advocate for the parcel tax measure. We will provide information to the public going forward to the best of our ability in public, in school meetings, in various releases about what the budget realities are and the financial realities are with or without a parcel tax, but we will do so in a neutral and objective way. We will not advocate for the parcel tax. So tonight's decision is important, and I also want to thank the committee, having worked on parcel tax previously, 2 successful parcel taxes that were, one was a squeaker and one was a little more successful. And having worked on a bond before in my former district, I know that we rely on the committees to help us make the case for a parcel tax. But again, once the board makes this decision tonight, district staff will need to then just lay out a case about our budget realities and the cuts we need to make, regardless of the passage or failure of a potential parcel tax.
All right, thank you. All right, so if we're ready, we'll move to vote. I'm blinking out. Oh, roll call vote? Okay, because it's a resolution. All right, we'll proceed to roll call vote. And I'll start to my right. Right? And aye. It passes 5-0. And just to be clear, for those that haven't read through the materials are for renewing a straight renewal at the 150 level. So, close that item. All right. So, as this is a special board meeting, we don't have the usual stuff at the end of the meeting. We'll proceed to the adjournment once we have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 5-0. All right, thanks everybody.